nowadays, mostly it's just dialing back and being able to just do more casual work, but building large cosplays, and especially when taking them into a larger competition, can be pretty fun.
So, who here has heard of EVA foam? What? You guys are so smart. If I had chocolate, you'd all get chocolate. And if that chocolate had peanut butter, some of you might have an allergic reaction, and that's not good. But we're going to focus on the important details today. Ethylene vinyl acetate foam, EVA foam, or some people call it EVA foam, which I'm always baffled by. Just because I have met a person one time who thought they were separate things, so it's like, okay. Why would you use EVA foam? I'm sure you guys are all kind of have a surface or even some experience working with it. It's easy to learn, you know, like it's a lot of different skills, right? But like, it's pretty easy to pick up when you say. It's affordable, you know. You can certainly spend a lot of money like on tools and equipment and everything if you're a serious crafter, but I don't think you need a lot to get started as compared to maybe 3D printing. You may spend a $500 machine, $30 filament, you know, different cleaning tools. And it's lightweight, you know, like 3D printing again is really great. Thermoplastics are really great. There's trade-offs with both mediums, and it's versatile. I just have here some stuff I made over the years. Thank you. If you see the key point there, that's actually the first commission I ever did. But you have things like a high-res shield in Inosuke swords. It's good for giant things like mallets, swords, axes, guns, bows. Yeah. So who here has ever just planned to do a cosplay maybe involving foam work? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Same like writing a story, right? The first thing is, what's the idea, right? So I call that project scope. And it's just a very basic thing, but it's really where any build starts, right? If I'm gonna make a suit of armor from a video game character, right? Maybe I decide that I'm just doing everything from the neck down. I'm not doing the helmet. Or I'm deciding to add this specific prop. I'm deciding to bow. So it's just a really simple thing. I find it really helpful to take some time to do this. It's a step I think a lot of people just kind of breeze over, and deciding like what you want out of it. Because once you have, once you decide your project, you can start collecting reference images. Just things to show it from multiple different angles, and then also incorporate good lighting. Is there any questions before I move on to the next section? We're going kind of fast because the focus is on like working with the foam. So some of these like planning things are really just like FYI stuff. But if you guys have any questions, raise your hand or just shout it out, okay? Okay, yeah. Reference images are also really good for if you're drafting a pattern or a template, establishing your proportions, right? Like you got Lionel's holding a sword there.
That's especially important if you're basing it off of something that isn't in reality, or has maybe a cartoony art style or something that is very exaggerated. You may find that in reality, or before you take into account your own body proportions, that it may be almost impossible to have, like, for example, Alphonse Elric's massive shoulders in Fullmetal Alchemist, where if you want to base it on reality, sometimes you have to maybe consider just scaling down or changing proportions or figuring out a harness system, which can be difficult.
Or something like Steven Universe, where they shift the model a lot, the character models. So, okay, yeah. Here I was just saying, like Thor in the first Avengers film, it's just estimates, right? Like I measure my forearm, it's about 9 inches. And you can see there, it's about the length of the handle. So therefore, if I'm drafting that pattern there, it just gives me a good basis. Yeah. And then once you have it, you could either, if you're just starting out, you might want to just find templates online, I draft all my own, you know? I really want that quality control. So there's just a variety of different patterns and templates you can use. And you can call them either ones, like in costume design, obviously we call them patterns. If you're coming from a drafting background, you may call it a template. Just a simple, flat representation of what you're gonna do, you know? So things like the Hyrule shield, I would make like a half pattern because it's symmetrical, and then I put that over into like a full pattern. You have things like that are stacked multiple layers. So for the armor here, for the shoulder pauldrons, I had a pattern for one side, and I had a pattern for the other side. And then once those pieces are glued together, I had paper laid over to make a pattern for the brim. So then I could just trace that out of 2mm foam and glue that on for that layered detail. Okay, good. So we're first giving information, and then after we're done with all the sections is when we'll go and like do some of these skills. So you don't have to memorize any of this. Say anything to add?
Not particularly.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. There we go. So we talked a lot about planning. Now we'll get into like the action of it, right? There's more nuance to cutting foam than most people think. You can use an X-Acto knife for foam that's thinner than 5mm and utility knives for thicker than 5mm foam. If you're working with something that's like high density foam, you certainly want to make sure you keep your blade sharp. I think that's something I see with a lot of people when they're getting into foam work and they have trouble like getting a nice, clean, consistent cut, is they're not keeping a sharp blade, and they're also working with like formats or something that's more spongy, that's going to be resistant to the pull of that blade.
Another thing to note also, just like with drawing, if you come from a drawing background, is you want to take nice, confident stroke, basically.
Yeah, put your weight on it.
At a decent angle. If you hesitate and go in between, you'll have some notches in there that you'll have to sand out later, which is not the worst, but it's certainly something that adds at least a little bit of extra steps.
Yeah. And just made me realize, cutting's pretty easy. There's not like a lot of advanced tips. It's really about practice, you know, to get really good cuts. Like there are some things, like if you're cutting like a circle, you know, instead of trying to cut like the whole half, I try to cut a corner of it, rotate, corner, cut, because then you get a lot of control over your cut. Any questions before the next section? No. Who here is still hungover from yesterday? Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I love it when they throw this on Friday and people come in high energy, so I won't ask too much of you guys. Yeah. So heat treat. Who here has ever used a heat gun on foam and like worked with it? Yeah? Did it go well? Yeah? No? Yeah. I was just reading something on like Reddit from a few years ago. Someone was talking about making a Shy Guy mask, and someone commented like, oh, foam doesn't keep its shape. You need to put a piece of fabric or something behind it, because foam doesn't. I was like, oh boy, okay. I talked a lot about like low density versus high density.
Be careful with fabric and heat guns. They're known to be very high, combustive.
Like, don't get me wrong. It is pretty valid if you shape like a shoulder piece and after you go and you glue like a piece of fabric. But we'll talk about other superior methods for that. But if your foam isn't holding shape, what I see a lot of people not understand is you just need to heat treat it more. Or you might be working with really low, spongy foam.
Or in the case of you're working with fabric underneath the cosplay, you'll have a very hot cosplay, which I can't exactly say is applicable, especially if it burns down your studio.
Right. So the thing you really want is like a good heat gun, you know, one that's able to get, I think it's like 100 degrees. Yeah. I know some people will try to use like a hair dryer or something. That's not going to do it. And please don't use any open flame. Please be safe, you know. But we do heat treating for two reasons. We do it to shape it, right? To hold that shape. But we also do it even if it's like you're going to make a blade and your piece is already straight. you want to seal the foam. And that will hold it for adhesives and will hold it for paints and other things that you're going to put on later. And it's where you see the fibers like tighten up, you know? And on like spongier foam, you'll see the fibers more. On denser foam, it's more packed together, thus dense. Yeah. What's up?
When the foam kind of seals up, does that mean it shrinks?
So, you want to take it, yeah?
It can shrink if you burn it a little bit more. If you go a little bit past when it melts on the outside, depending on the quality, the lower quality foam shrinks more. It's funny that you mention that because sometimes on really rare occasions, I've actually chosen to shrink something intentionally to get it to the right spot. Like say bevels on a piece of armor. If one of the bevels maybe is just a little bit bigger than the others, there have been times where I actually over heat gun it in the hopes of shrinking it just enough to match the others, and that is a viable tactic. So when you're doing heat gun, depending on the quality of the foam, you kind of have to account for a tiny bit of shrinkage.
Yeah, and the other thing I was gonna say that is it's really proportional to the piece. So if you're working with a small piece, you know, if you're measuring something really long, it might shrink like a tiny bit, but it's not something that I'm usually very concerned about. You can always, like, you have your pattern and you have the piece and you can kind of coil around, you know. But we'll also talk about things like foam clay. If you are short on a piece and you need to just fill the gap a little bit. There was another point that I was gonna make too. Do you?
Well, most of the time, even when you're getting that nice sheen, so when you create a sheen using the heat gun, the goal basically is so that way the paint doesn't saturate into the prop, as well as retaining its shape. And what happens is that if you don't do it, it takes a lot more layers of paint to go onto that foam as it just keeps on soaking inside. So it kind of creates a nice sheen on the outside of the foam. And what's nice is that you don't actually need nearly, you can get that sheen before it starts to shrink. That's what's nice, is it doesn't require a lot. And oftentimes, most heat guns, lowest setting can do it, which is quite nice. It's a lot more safe.
The other thing I'll talk about that I did want to mention that is important too is the thickness of the foam that you're working with and everything, you know. Depending on the piece, it'll just take like 10 seconds of heating if it's like a thin 2 millimeter piece and I just want to seal it and everything. If it's like 10 millimeter that's like thicker, it might be like a minute of heating it, you know. You can always heat it, shape it, and if it's not holding its shape or doesn't look sealed enough, heat it again. You just want to obviously stop before you burn that piece because you can't undo burning foam. You can't sand it off without taking it's like a layer of skin, you know?
And with thicker pieces, it's also important, just so that way the foam behaves the way you want it to. Like say for a larger pauldron like this, you may want to actually heat treat both sides while you're bending, so that way you can manipulate the foam better.
Yeah.
Thinner pieces, you can kind of get away with just one side, especially if you're using like some of the cheaper craft foams.
Yeah.
But for bigger pieces, heck, I even actually recommend sometimes for people to actually find something to brace it. So you don't have to be holding this thing constantly. You can find a way to brace the piece into the shape you want using, say, tape, or maybe a pile of books on each side just to kind of push it in place.
For me, I go section by section because you don't have to heat treat the whole thing either. You can heat treat like just this one half of it right here, and I can curve this down. And then when that's cool, I can heat this and do it, and then glue these two together. There's a dart here, and so this is one piece, but a dart in half, and then I curve them together. Yeah. Okay. Any questions before next? You guys are doing so well. Okay. So gluing, right? Who's here glued? Go well. Yeah. Anyone stick their hand to a project? You're like, oh, this is so good, and then you're like, yeah, no, yeah. I use a lot of, and so we're talking about heat treating in this, you know. We're gonna get over there, and we're gonna like show you guys things, and you'll get to do some yourself. So like, but So I'll talk very briefly. I use Barge contact cement. I see people will use things like Gorilla Glue. You'll swear by it, right?
I love Gorilla Glue.
You love your Gorilla Glue. Me, I don't like animal cruelty, so I won't use the gorilla. No. But what I find is really helpful is like specific tools. Like I don't do it straight out of the small bottle. I'll put it in a squeeze bottle because that really provides like a lot of control for the area that the glue is coming out. And then I have these, as you can see from the center picture here, these little makeup brushes, these little plastic spatulas are so good. I know when I first got into it, people talked about just having a spare piece of foam and everything. But then the issue with that is the glue on the foam itself dries and everything. On the spatulas, it dries, and then you just peel it off and you can reuse it. So, yeah.
There's also advantages and disadvantages to each types of glue you can use. For example, with barge cement, one of the nice things about it is that it can provide a nice adhesive surface quickly, so you don't have to hold it in place for very long. Same with hot glue. The only difference is that it can be prone to, well, burning the EVA foam if it's a little hot, especially if you have a higher temperature, older hot glue gun. With things like Gorilla Glue though, it's a little bit less user-friendly because you often have to brace it so that way it has time to dry, and using too much of it, it can bubble and create some nasty, what I like to call catacombs kind of thing. So really it just kind of comes down to selection of the right glue for you. I usually would say barge cement is probably the most user-friendly.
And I want to talk a little bit of technique. Again, we'll show this, but just to make sure everyone gets it, you know. I see a lot of people that'll just put down the glue, it's all globby, and then they wait like 10 seconds and they slap it together and it slides past each other, or it gets webbing and everything. And what's happening there is it hasn't had time to properly like coagulate and form a surface. So you see here where I'm holding the white foam, it's using the paint, the makeup brush really thins it out and spreads it out, and it allows it to grip more of the foam. And it also allows it to dry faster, to be workable dry, so that when you stick them together, there's no gap, and it's really solid and a really tight hold. Does that make sense? Good. Good. Yeah, I wish I brought candy. I mean, I had it, but I ate it, so. So we talked about like you're shaping it, and maybe you do like a piece of fabric after. What I do is bridges, right? So you see there I actually have pictures of these shoulder pauldrons, right? You see on the inside there in the center, I have two from the dart, and what I will do is when they're cut, I'm putting glue on the very edges, and then when they're ready, I'm pressing them together. I'm starting from the top of that dart all the way to the edge. I'm giving it, but that's not gonna hold. It needs support, otherwise it's gonna bump up and collapse and everything. So you will do a piece of foam in there to bridge it, you know? And so you'll first hold those edges together, and then you'll put some glue on the other side there, glue on a strip of foam, and you'll trace that around the curve, and that will reinforce the shape and provide a lot of structural support. Yeah, that's really it to bridges, you know? I guess you could also decide on the thickness of how far you go and how wide you make it. It really depends on how much support you think that piece needs, you know? I've done bridges with just like 2mm foam, if it's like, doesn't really need support, but you could go up to something like 5. Oh, that's weird.
You talk about foam plate.
No, I know, it like disappeared my video. Yeah. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, it has audio, so I'm going to just play the whole video as well TikTok. Foam play is another thing that's really useful. It doesn't provide structural support, but it will obviously provide aesthetic detailing. So like on the outside of the pauldron, right, I have that seam there, and so I just use foam clay to put it in, but you can also use it for detailing too. Yeah.
How many of you have worked with, not necessarily foam clay, but just like your regular pottery clay, say in school? The cool thing with foam clay is it oftentimes behaves very similarly to clay pottery. And you could use very similar techniques with foam clay, especially if you decide to add water. You can actually change the viscosity, and you can actually do things like slip and score if you really wanted to, which is really nice. I also find that clay, basically the foam clay, can get in and make tiny little details that you can't really do with the main EVA. Like say if you have engravings on a piece of armor, like some coils, or for example, like on these,
Oh,
Douglas's
right
props,
here. Yeah.
these are mostly made of foam clay that goes around it to add these upper details. Whereas that'd be much harder to do with using just cuttings of EVA foam, especially for smooth and concave surfaces.
Actually, the big coils are half dowel foams, and they're just clay between the pieces to bridge that.
Well, there's a few in here that are.
Like
Yeah.
here, this is the clay.
Yeah, that
This,
one right there.
like this detail here is the clay. Yeah.
But incidentally, if I made something like this, you could also do that with foam clay as well. So there's different ways you can do it.
Yeah. It's also really good if like I was making a Millennium puzzle, you know, I could cut the eye out of like a piece of Tilmy or foam, right? Or what I do is, you know, I my pencil like where I want that eye to be, and then I'm putting the foam down, you know, and shaping it out. It's just really good. It's a great time saver. And then you
Yes.
Do you guys have luck with the foam clay adhering to EVA? Or
Um,
do you use barge cement?
No,
It usually likes to stick on its own quite nicely. I mean, especially if you wet it down first. Though if you're extra cautious, you can take those engravings and make them their own pieces first, and then glue them with barge cement afterwards. I've kind of done both.
what I have seen people do is not stencils. What was I thinking of? When you put the clay in molds. Yeah, or people might do molds with clay and wait for that to dry and then glue them. But honestly, like my thing is I just didn't use enough water, so I'll take like I'll have a little cup and I'll wet my fingers and I'll just rub it like on there, you know, and then I work with the clay and I'm doing it. Like water is really not bad. The foam absorbs it and everything. And you do it after you've heat treated the piece already too, so it's already sealed, it's already ready, and then
Just like regular clay, the wetter the clay is, the stickier it gets.
yeah. Okay, we can get time. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I didn't do it. And we broke the internet.
I'm a super hacker, clearly.
The planet. Okay. Oh.
I didn't install NordVPN.
Alright. Who here has ever tried to, or has made a foam weapon prop? Like a sword, a scythe, yeah? Yeah? How'd it go?
It went okay. I took used the wood dowel in it, so I think it was.
Yeah? Do you mind if I ask what you made?
It was Sino's pole arm
Uh-huh.
from Genshin Impact.
Ah,
Yeah.
It's relatively large, I believe.
yeah.
So you had like a pole for the,
I used
Yeah.
a broomstick from Dollar Store.
yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the hardware store. I don't know if you guys have ever been there. But honestly, like that picture there is from like my studio. I'll often just have like they would have at the hardware store my dowels, just kind of like sorted by like I have my PVC ones, my metal ones, my wooden ones, and then sorted by height.
My favorite craft store is Menards and Lowe's.
Yeah, like we talked about bridges, that's what I call like external supports on like a piece of armor. And you can also use, just going back on bridges, if you're making a mask, right, like a Shy Guy mask that curves around, you know, I would dart the edge and then I would put bridges to hold that shape a lot. In weapon props, if you're gonna make a sword, a scythe, a gun, you know, you want internal supports. And so what is really great, it is also important to choose your thing carefully if you're flying. I know they don't like you having metal inside your props. The downside with it is you can't get really thin blades, you know? And so that's where I like TIG welding rods is what I'll do, because they are strong enough to hold their shape, but easy enough to bend without little effort to get it to like if you're having a curved katana or a scythe blade or something.
It also depends on what kind of wood you pick as well. Not all woods are created equal. Like for example, if you pick something like balsa or pine, it's gonna flex a lot, and I generally don't recommend balsa unless you're going for extremely lightweight. Whereas something in comparison like oak, for example, is gonna be very sturdy in comparison. Diameter is also important as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're doing something like PVC, it has the advantage of you could drill a hole through it, and then you could do a cross guard with another, like a thinner metal. And that may be something helpful if you're making like a Buster Sword, or the Executioner blade from Naruto. Yep.
Is there like with foam and PVC pipes, would there be a easy way to make it threaded so if you could screw it on so it'd be detachable, make it smaller for transport?
Yeah, no, that's actually something that I've done a lot with different things. And that's like at the hardware store, for like paint rollers, I know that they'll have like pre-cut segments you can do. You know, you can buy different thread bits for your PVC. So
A simple way that I even did it, I built a massive on the side axe for a tech priest, and you saw earlier in the image that actually had a collapsible section. It was two pieces of PVC, metal rods on both ends, and I actually took a smaller PVC pipe and shoved it inside, glued those, cut it, so that way, basically drill the hole through it so you could actually thread a few zip ties through it actually, which is cool because then you can actually make piece bonding actually serve a purpose with aesthetic, not just the safety, but also to keep your cosplay together.
yeah. And that's part of like project scope and like planning it, right? If you were gonna make like the gun over here, Jack's morph gun from Jak 2 and 3, I had to ship that to my customer, and so I didn't want to send them something super long, and it's also like something that is easy to road. So I had two PVC pipes for the barrel, and those blended into the PVC pipes that would go through the chamber. What do you call it? I don't know. I don't know guns that well.
Yes.
But my point is that wasn't one piece of PVC pipe. It was one that fit into each other. So that barrel actually came off. And so they could basically like have it in half and put it in a backpack or a bag or whatever, you know?
You had another question?
Yeah. So say I grabbed like a metal piece of pipe, like a thin, so like I was making like a pickaxe or something. What would be the best way to glue foam to that?
Oh, just barge.
You could do barge, or if you're really concerned about structural support, you can pull out something like Gorilla Glue. Though it takes a lot longer to dry, it's going to be, there's very few glues I've seen that are stronger, essentially.
Would it be worth to sand the pipe first and then apply
I think
glue?
there's, yeah.
It would not be a
wouldn't
bad
hurt,
idea.
yeah. What you can always do, I'm sure you guys know this, but just, you know, is I do little experiments sometimes with different like materials and everything, you know, if I'm nervous about it working on the main thing. So I might try like just gluing two pieces of foam together or glue foam to something else to see how it really adheres.
I've had funny moments where the Gorilla Glue itself is literally stronger than the material I'm working with. Please don't put it on your skin.
Where did I move on? Okay. Oh wow, we're really towards the end of like the informational thing. Any more questions on supports? No? Okay. So Sandy, my favorite part, people's least favorite parts. No, I mean, if you're making something like armor, you might not have to sand at all, like you cut your piece. I did no sanding except for here on the little gear threads. They, in the game, they like taper down. So you can see there, I had the pieces cut and then I'm sanding it down to get that edge. Or if you want to touch up one of your edges. Obviously, if you're making like a scythe, a sword, some sort of bladed weapon,
Or even battle damage.
any battle damage, right? If you're making an axe, you're gonna want to take that square edge, and you're gonna want to have it kind of at a point. And so that's just where journaling comes in. You can use things like a belt sander. You can find them pretty cheap, like smaller ones for like 100. If you have the space, you know, just please wear a dust mask, be safe, be smart, right? But I personally, like, for my projects, it's overkill, so I just use a Dremel, and we'll have one over there, and we'll show you it. And just being mindful of which way the bit is rotating and making sure you're getting good resistance, you know? Because it's not that difficult, but it's a lot of practice and it's very rewarding, you know, once you have it. The other thing I'll say with that is when you sand foam, you're actually tearing off that layer of foam that you've sealed from heat treating. And it can be a little coarse, a little rough. So if I'm doing something like the Traveler's Bow, where I'm taking that edge and rounding it out, what I would do is I take the Dremel, I take off a lot of bulk, and then I'll heat treat it, seal it up again, and then come in with some smoother sandpaper while it's still kind of hot, and that provides like a nice smooth top layer that seals, and it's gonna hold the paint. Any stories about sanding with your tech grease?
Not particularly. I mean, one nice thing. Oh, yeah, you have a question?
Just a quick one. How do you usually go about cleaning up the foam after if backlight is going all over the place?
So I don't work in my garage like I used to when I had like, you know, more production. We're pumping out like 40, 50 props, you know. I have a spare bedroom and I have a dedicated foam station separate from like my fabric crafting station, right? So it's just honestly similar to, I have a folding table and I have a series of cutting mats, and then I have right next to them my shop vac with a nice little cord, you know. And so that's often like what I'll do is I'm frequently like vacuuming the space and everything, you know. I've seen some people that they'll have the vacuum like taped to the thing or whatever while they're standing, you know. It doesn't kick up that much, so like it's not like dispersed all in the air. And you want a dust mask, you know, to make sure you're not, you know. And I vacuum it, you know, and it's easy cleanup, like you've seen it. My space is, yeah.
Foam is usually pretty easy just to vacuum up. It just kind of comes off as sort of a light dust.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And that is a thing too, with contact cement, I did talk about it. It's non-toxic, you know, it's not gonna hurt you if you have it on your hands, but for like cleanliness, for ease of use, I like wearing like plastic gloves, you know? So like if I don't stick myself to my foam, but also so I'm done, I can just take it off and throw it, you know? Like it's so nice. And like with sanding, I'll wear a glove too, so I don't have to try and wash all that foam off my hand. Like you might still get some for your wrist, but I'm just saying you're minimizing your cleanup effort.
Okay, cool.
All right, any questions before we get to the workshop art? Yes.
Say you didn't have like a heat gun and you wanted to bend foam, say for like a handle, would there be any decent way to do it without a heat gun?
I mean, it's always, the denser it is, you know, the more it's gonna wanna keep its shape, you know? So they're really,
With really, really thin layers of foam,
yeah.
you may be able to get away
Yeah.
without it by basically just adding a lot more primer to seal it instead. But for much larger pieces, it's very difficult to manipulate the foam without heat treating, just because it becomes a lot more rigid when you heat treat as well. So that kind of gets rid of like that illusion when you're walking around with say armor and you have say like a floppy piece, and it would drive you crazy where you're like, I wish this was more rigid. That's kind of what the heat treating fixes. If you're concerned about cost, I usually would say that you don't necessarily need an expensive heat gun.
no, it's like $30, yeah.
The cheapest heat guns get to the temperatures you want already on usually the lowest settings,
Yeah.
which is quite nice. So I mean, usually I just go for bargain bin heat guns at a hardware store.
Yeah.
And also, like when you cut foam to seal around a handle, that little seam that would go down, the best way to fill that in or seal that so it's nice and smooth.
You can use something like foam clay. You know, if your measurements are off and they don't just perfectly line, you know? Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Alright, so you have finished your prop, like structurally, it's all glued together. You're ready to get paint. Not yet, right, Dana?
Yeah.
Your foam is sealed, sure, but you will want a sealing agent. And so there are a bunch. I'm just gonna be very brief about it, you know. Honestly, just going on YouTube, some of you already have like, you know, a Plastidip or something, or Mod Podge, you know, is pretty cheap. There's a ton of different videos that'll show like plus and minuses, and I really think it's kind of up to to preference on what you want to use. If you want something like an aerosol, if you're more comfortable with acrylics, if you don't want to spend more money or want to be on a budget, you know.
They all have different advantages and disadvantages. I mean, one thing about Mod Podge is really nice is that it behaves sort of like Elmer's glue. So, and it's very cheap. You can find that very abundantly. Though it takes quite a few layers, usually get a nice thickness. Other ones that have advantages, say gesso, for example. If you come from a painting background, you can use that as well, but if you have pieces that flex a lot, it could start to crack. So that's something to watch for, but it handles paint a lot better than most. Plastidip, depending on if you like work with cars or things like that, or maybe the handles of shop tools, that one is incredibly durable, but it does shrink on your projects. So if you do use a large amount of Plastidip, the shrinking may cause some problems, and you're going to want to Plastidip all sides because it likes to peel. But if it doesn't peel, it's extremely durable. So that's quite nice, especially if you don't want your suit to get scratched up.
Also, we talked about that the contact cement isn't toxic, Mod Podge isn't toxic, you know.
Plastidip probably has a massive FDA
It is,
paragraph
yeah.
of bad things, probably for me.
Yeah, so if you're gonna, you know, if you're working with any kind of new chemical, you know, make sure you just like read up and you take proper safety steps.
If I can't pronounce the word of what it does, it's probably bad for me.
Yeah, any questions on sealing? Okay. Da-da-da-da-da. You guys did it! I know. Anyone ready to sculpt? Okay, yeah, if you guys want to just start moving chairs, get around, you know.
We'll do a little demonstration as well, basically, to kind of observe some of the stuff.
I'm gonna go back and cutting, and then it's gonna show us like the first thing, you know. And we have like 40 minutes left, so. Tana, can you stop my phone?
I don't know where you're, oh, yes.
Like it's